Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a stack of sources, maybe articles, research, even your own notes, and we really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights.
Exactly. We want to give you a shortcut, basically, to being genuinely well-informed on the topic at hand.
We're here to be your guides, helping you cut through all the noise and really understand what matters in the material you've shared with us.
And today we are embarking on a really fascinating journey. I think transformative is the right word.
Oh yeah. What are we diving into?
We're going deep into the teachings of Neville Goddard, and specifically how he offers this incredibly unique, almost revolutionary way to look at the Bible.
Okay, Neville Goddard in the Bible. That sounds interesting already. What's the mission for this dive?
Our mission is to explore how these ancient texts, which people often take very literally, can actually be seen as, well, as profound practical parables. Parables for creating your own reality.
Through imagination. I know that's central to his work.
Precisely. Through the power of your imagination and what Neville famously calls the law of assumption. It's really a masterclass in seeing the kingdom of heaven not as out there somewhere, but within yourself.
Right. So this isn't just theory then. We're talking practical application, potentially changing how you live your life.
Absolutely. Get ready for some real aha moments, things that might genuinely shift how you approach your desires, your goals, maybe everything you thought you knew about how reality works.
We'll unpack some surprising ideas for sure, but we'll try and make even the denser concepts really accessible and engaging for everyone listening.
Definitely. So let's get started. Where do we begin? We have to start at the absolute foundation, the core principle of Neville Goddard's entire philosophy.
Okay.
And it's a big one. It challenges a lot of conventional thinking right off bat. His core assertion is this: imagination is God, the I am within you.
Imagination is God, not like God, not a tool from God, but actually I ask God.
That's exactly what he's saying. And this is where, like you said, it gets really paradigm shifting for people. He's talking about your fundamental, unconditioned awareness of being. That feeling, that sense you have right now of just being the I am.
Uh-huh. That sense before you add any labels like I am tired or I am happy. Just the I am.
Precisely that raw awareness.
Yeah.
Neville asserts that is the Lord. It's the singular creator of every single conditioned state, every experience, every circumstance you ever encounter.
Wow. Okay. That's huge. What's the biggest hurdle for people trying to wrap their heads around that, identifying themselves, their own awareness with divinity?
I think the biggest hurdle is just years, centuries maybe, of conditioning. We're taught almost universally to place God outside ourselves.
Right. Somewhere up there or out there, an external force.
Exactly. We look up, we look out, we pray to something separate. But Neville's work, especially in Your Faith is Your Fortune, argues really strongly against this separation. He insists this internal awareness, your consciousness itself is God.
And he uses the Bible to back this up.
He does. He references passages directly. Like from Isaiah, he quotes, I am the Lord, that is my name, and my glory will I not give to another. And also, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. For Neville, this isn't poetic metaphor.
It's a direct identification.
Yes, it's the ultimate decentralization of divine power. It brings it fully inside, into your own being.
So it stops being just philosophy at that point. It becomes a really profound personal shift. If I am is God, if my awareness is the creative force,
Then recognizing that changes everything. It's not just about hope anymore. It fundamentally transforms your world. The source puts it beautifully, actually, saying it turns your world from a desert of hopelessness into a land of milk and honey.
it sounds like moving from trying to find God or persuade God to discovering the divine power that's already active within your own awareness.
That's it, exactly. It's a staggering self-discovery. And it shifts responsibility, too, doesn't it?
How so? Responsibility for what?
For your reality. It shifts it from being a burden, like, oh no, it's all my fault, to being an immense power. You're no longer just reacting to circumstances. You realize you're the architect.
So you can consciously direct your inner state instead of just being pushed around by the outside world?
Precisely.
Mm.
And building right on this, Neville makes it another huge connection. He links this I am, this divine awareness, directly to the concept of Christ.
Okay, wait. He says man's imagination is Christ.
Yes. Again, not a metaphor, not just poetic language.
Yeah.
A direct functional identification. Your imaginative faculty is the biblical Christ.
That's definitely going to sound controversial to people used to more traditional interpretations. How does he support that?
He cites scriptures like Ephesians 5:1, "Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light."
Okay.
For Neville, the awakening isn't about literal resurrection from a physical grave. It's awakening to your own imaginative power, realizing that this faculty within you is the Christ, the source of light, the creative power.
So what happens when someone truly gets that, when they make that connection internally?
Well, the sources say that the moment a person genuinely discovers their imagination is Christ, they become capable of accomplishing things, acts, on this normal level of existence that can really only be described as miraculous.
Miraculous, like healing or changing circumstances dramatically.
Yes, things like that.
Yep.
It's a shift from seeing miracles as external interventions, God doing something to you or for you, to understanding them as, well, as natural results of activating this awakened divine inner faculty. The miracle-working power is within your own consciousness.
And didn't you mention he interprets that line from John, "You did not choose me, I have chosen you"? How does that fit in? Because that usually sounds like predestination.
Right, it often does. But Neville flips it. He suggests that until you truly grasp Christ as your own imagination, until you realize your creative power is this divine choosing force, you see everything objectively.
Meaning separate from yourself.
Exactly. You see people, events, circumstances as external things happening to you without seeing your own subjective connection. You don't realize that every single encounter, every situation is actually a direct reflection, an outpicturing of your own imaginative state.
Whether you assumed it consciously or not.
Precisely. So in that sense, you didn't consciously choose your current reality by picking items off a menu, but your imagination, operating on your dominant assumptions, has chosen to manifest it.
Wow, okay. So it's not an external God picking you. It's your own inherent divine power, your imagination, that's always creating, always choosing to manifest based on what you assume to be true.
That's the core idea. The power isn't external, something you have to beg for or earn. It's right there, inside you, waiting to be awakened and, crucially, consciously directed.
Which brings us perfectly to the how. How does this divine imagination actually operate? This must be the law of assumption.
Exactly. This is where the theory hits the ground running. Practical application. The law of assumption sounds incredibly simple, but its implications are just vast.
So what is it, fundamentally?
At its core, an assumption, even if it seems totally false compared to your current external reality, if you persist in it, will harden into fact.
Persist. Meaning you just keep believing it, keep feeling it.
Yes, you live in the assumption. The sources from awakened imagination are really clear on this. It's not about just wishing or hoping. It's about fully occupying the state of the wish fulfilled, feeling it as real right now.
It sounds more intense than just positive thinking.
Oh, much deeper. Neville states that continuous imagination is sufficient for all things. Think about that. Sufficient for all things.
That's a bold claim.
It is. He's saying imagination isn't just one tool in your toolkit. It's the engine itself, the very force of creation. He even uses 1 Corinthians to back this up.
How so?
He talks about these fixed attitudes of mind which do not conform to the external reality, and are therefore called imaginary things which are not. He says these imaginary things will nevertheless bring to naught things that are.
So the things that only exist in your imagination can actually cancel out or replace what seems solid and real in the outside world.
Exactly. And he acknowledges this sounds like foolishness and a stumbling block to conventional thinking, which is all about dealing with reality as it is.
Right. We're told not to be delusional, to face facts.
But Neville argues that what we call facts, or reality, are just the solidified results of our past assumptions. So the quote from 1 Corinthians becomes the cornerstone. What seems like nothing, just an idea, an assumption in your mind, can actually dissolve or replace what currently is real externally.
It completely flips the script on what's primary. The invisible assumption becomes the true cause, and the visible world is the effect.
You got it. The invisible is the true reality from which the visible springs.
Okay, so practically, how do you do that? How do you make the invisible visible? The process is described as giving reality to the invisible, right?
Yes. To make your desire an objective physical fact, you have to focus your attention on that invisible state, that assumed reality, until it takes on the feeling of reality.
The feeling. What does that actually feel like? Is it excitement or just calm knowing?
It could be different things for different people or desires, but the key is a feeling of naturalness. It's the feeling you have when you simply know something is true, done, finished, regardless of what your senses are currently telling you.
Okay.
The source, out of this world, explains that when your focused attention creates that distinctness, that feeling of reality, your desire has basically been given the right to become a visible, concrete fact.
Like you've stamped it for approval in the invisible realm.
Kind of, yeah. You're not just wishing anymore. You've internalized it so deeply, it's already a done deal in your consciousness. You signed off on it.
And for people who struggle with how this inner feeling translates to the outer world, he talks about a fourth dimensional world.
Right. He explains it like this. When you truly immerse yourself in that feeling of the wish fulfilled, you're actually performing the action, living the reality in this fourth dimensional world. A world beyond our normal 3 dimensions of space, maybe including time differently.
And because it's real there.
It then has to be reenacted here in our familiar 3rd dimensional world. It's a natural consequence, not a struggle. Manifestation isn't fighting reality. It's the natural outflow of your inner imaginative work.
It's not magic, it's a law of consciousness.
Exactly. Like planting a seed. You provide the right inner conditions, the feeling, the assumption, and the outer world naturally reorganizes itself to match. You don't struggle to make the seed grow.
Okay, this is starting to click. So we understand imagination is God, the I am. We understand the law of assumption is the mechanism. How do we actually do it consistently? This must be the practical application, thinking from the end and revision.
Yes, this is where it gets really practical. And honestly, this next point is often where people either unlock massive power or get stuck.
What is it?
It's the crucial difference between thinking of the end and thinking from the end.
Thinking of versus thinking from, what's the distinction?
Thinking of the end keeps you as an onlooker. You're observing your desire from a distance, like watching a movie of it. Wouldn't it be nice if?
Okay, I see.
But the real creative power comes from thinking from the end. You have to be a partaker. You must actually be there in your imagination, experiencing the fulfilled wish as if it's your current reality right now. It's an act of imaginative occupancy.
So back to the Barbados example you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It's not just picturing Barbados, it's imagining from Barbados, seeing the world through the eyes of someone who was already there, feeling the sand, smelling the sea air, living and breathing as if you are already in that state.
And Neville insists this isn't just daydreaming.
He's very clear.
Yeah.
This isn't mere fancy. He says it's a truth you can prove through your own experience. If you genuinely occupy that desired state in imagination, your subjective experience will realize itself objectively.
What's the common mistake people make here? Just visualizing without really stepping into it.
That's a big one. They see the picture, but they stay outside the frame. They're thinking about the goal, not from the feeling of having achieved it.
And the Abdullah story illustrates this perfectly.
Absolutely. Neville wanted to go to Barbados. Couldn't see how. Abdullah did give him practical tips on saving money.
No. What did he say?
He told Neville, essentially, you are in Barbados. He instructed him to imagine himself to be in Barbados, to think and view the world from that state of consciousness, not just think about going.
Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Exactly. Abdullah stressed, you must not concern yourself with the ways and means. The state of consciousness of already being in Barbados, if occupied by your imagination, will devise the means.
So the how takes care of itself.
The how is the domain of the greater intelligence within, the I am. Your only job is to occupy the end state, to feel it real.
And this way of thinking even reinterprets famous Bible verses like, in my Father's house are many mansions.
Right. John 14.2-3. Traditionally seen as literal places in heaven, but Neville sees these mansions as different states of consciousness, different imaginative states available to you now.
So I go to prepare a place for you means?
It means preparing that state in your imagination. By sleeping in a desired state, imaginatively feeling it real as you drift off to sleep. For example, you fuse your consciousness, your I am, with that state.
And then you're compelled to experience that state in the flesh.
Exactly. You prepare the place within, and then manifestation comes again to bring you into that state physically. It's an inner dwelling that precedes the outer reality.
This connects directly to another huge principle, doesn't it? The idea that there's no one to change but self.
Yes. This one can feel challenging, but it's also incredibly liberating.
Why challenging? Because it puts all the responsibility on us.
Partly. But mostly because it goes against our instinct to try and change things out there. The source says, to attempt to change the world before we change our concept of ourselves is to struggle against the nature of things.
As within, so without.
That's the essence. There can be no outer change until there's first an inner change. We keep trying to rearrange the furniture on the deck of the Titanic, metaphorically speaking, instead of changing the inner blueprint.
So the world is just a mirror, reflecting our inner state, our concept of self.
Exactly. And the moment you successfully transform your concept of self, what you assume to be true about yourself and your life, your external world has to change. It will dissolve and reshape itself to match that new inner affirmation. It's like a perfectly responsive mirror.
But what about the feeling of blame? If my life is difficult, is it my fault? That can feel harsh.
That's a crucial clarification. Neville isn't about blame. He's about power. It's
Right.
not about fault, it's about freedom. Yes, you created your current reality, but often unconsciously through assumptions you didn't even know you held.
Okay.
The power in no one to change but self is realizing, if I created this, even unconsciously, then I have the power to change it by changing myself, my assumptions. You don't need anyone else's permission or cooperation.
The control point is always internal.
Always. And to make that change, Neville says you must deny your present identity, or deny himself.
Deny myself. That sounds difficult.
It's not denying your core being. It's denying the limitations of your current identity and circumstances. It means taking your attention away from the problem, away from the unwanted reality.
Why? Doesn't ignoring a problem make it worse?
Not according to this principle. The problem, the unwanted state, will only live as long as you are conscious of it. Attention is energy. You withdraw energy from the problem by shifting your focus.
So you starve the problem and feed the solution.
Precisely. He references the Bible again. The battle is not yours, but God's, meaning you don't fight the external problem head on. You hand the battle over to your inner God, your I am, by shifting your consciousness away from the problem and onto the already fulfilled desire.
That's completely counterintuitive to how we usually operate, focusing intensely on the problem.
It is, but it aligns perfectly with the idea that attention gives life. Where your attention goes, energy flows. Shift attention to the desired state, feel it real, and you starve the old reality while nourishing the new.
And this idea of shifting attention and changing the inner state applies not just to the present, but also to the past, right? Which leads us to the practice of revision.
Ah, revision. Yes. This is one of Neville's most practical and, I think, liberating tools.
What is it exactly? Changing the past. You can't actually change what happened.
You can't change the literal historical event, no. But you can change its meaning, its impact on you, and therefore its effect on your present and future. Revision isn't about denial. It's about transformation.
How does it work?
You deliberately withdraw your attention from how the event actually unfolded, say, an unpleasant conversation, a mistake you made, a vexatious day, as the source calls it,
Okay.
and you give your full attention, your full imaginative energy joyously to a revised version of that day or event.
So you replay it in your mind, but differently.
Exactly. You rewrite the script in your imagination.
Yeah.
You imagine the conversation going perfectly, the mistake being rectified, the day ending wonderfully. You do this vividly, feeling the emotions, the relief, the joy, the satisfaction of the revised scene.
And the point is,
The point, Neville says, quoting Proverbs, is, "Thy ways are ways of pleasantness, and all thy paths are peace." Revision should feel good. It should bring relief and peace. By changing the memory and its emotional charge within you, you prevent that past event from casting a negative shadow on your present or dictating your future reactions.
so if I had a really awkward meeting yesterday, I could revise it tonight.
Yes. Tonight, before sleep, you could replay that meeting in your mind's eye, but see it going smoothly. See yourself confident, hear the conversation flowing well, feel the positive outcome, feel the relief and satisfaction until it feels real.
And this changes, what? The memory.
It changes the dominant memory and its emotional residue within you. It neutralizes the negative charge and replaces it with a positive one, which then influences your future assumptions and reactions. It also applies to forgiving others.
How does revision relate to forgiveness?
Effective forgiveness, Neville taught, isn't about grudgingly letting someone off the hook out of duty. Duty has no momentum, he said. True forgiveness comes from a sincere desire to identify others with their ideal.
So you revise your image of them.
Yes, you see them in your imagination, not as they were or even as they are, but as their highest, best self. You revise the scene involving them to reflect that ideal interaction. This act of imaginative identification frees you from the resentment or hurt.
That's a very different take on forgiveness. It's an internal creative act, not just an external pardon. And all of this assumption, revision, seems deeply tied to our internal chatter, our inner talking.
Absolutely. Neville considered inner talking one of the two great gifts given uniquely to humans, alongside imagination itself.
Why is it so important?
Because our inner speech, the conversations we constantly have with ourselves, is literally creating our reality. It's the word that becomes flesh. If your inner talk is full of lack, fear, complaint,
Then your outer world will reflect that.
faithfully, Neville stresses that the right inner speech is the speech of fulfilled desire. It's constantly affirming internally, I am that which you desire to be,
I am healthy, I am prosperous, I am loved, even if the senses deny it.
especially if the senses deny it. That inner talking, he says, matures in the dark, like a seed underground, and eventually issues into the light as objective reality.
So how do we manage this? We have so many thoughts.
It takes discipline, certainly. You have to become aware of your habitual inner conversations, monitor them. And when you catch yourself in negative or limiting self-talk, you consciously revise it.
Immediately.
Yes, you mentally stop the negative track and replace it with the affirmation of the wish fulfilled. Instead of, this is so hard, think, everything's working out perfectly for me. Instead of, I'm worried, feel all is well. This constant conscious redirection is incredibly potent.
It really frames our inner world as this incredibly active creative space. Okay, so with these foundations laid, let's explore some of the deeper concepts and symbolic biblical interpretations Neville offered. These often go even further beyond traditional views.
They certainly do. A key one is his distinction between active versus passive imagination.
Active versus passive. How does he illustrate that?
He uses the story of Cain and Abel. Not literally, of course, but symbolically.
Cain and Abel, the farmers, the offerings.
Exactly. Neville says, the Lord or consciousness has no respect for such passive use of imagination, which is the gift of Cain.
Okay, what's the passive use? Is that just daydreaming aimlessly?
It's more than that. It's acknowledging negative appearances, dwelling on problems, worrying, complaining about circumstances, without taking any active imaginative step to change them. It's accepting the undesirable as final. That's the gift of Cain. And offering consciousness doesn't accept because it lacks deliberate creative intent.
So the gift of Abel is...
That's the active, voluntary, loving exercise of the imagination on behalf of man, for himself and others. It's consciously choosing a desired state and using your imagination deliberately, lovingly, to bring it forth. That's the offering consciousness delights in.
So we're actively encouraged to ignore the facts if they're unpleasant and just declare ourselves to be what we want to be.
Precisely. Disregard appearances. Declare himself to be the man he wants to be. Imagine beauty where senses show ashes, joy where they show trouble. He uses Joel 3.10, let the weak man say, I am strong.
Not as a hope, but as a declaration of current inner reality.
Exactly. It's an act of conscious, active, imaginative creation, assuming the desired state despite sensory evidence. The inner identity dictates the outer conformity.
This ties right into the kingdom within, doesn't it? Luke 17.21, the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Absolutely central. For Neville, echoing William Blake, who he often quoted, the inner world, your imagination, dreams, visions, assumptions. That's the true reality.
And the outer world?
The outer world is just a shadow, a reflection. It gets all its properties, its substance from the real man, the imaginative man within. Your physical reality is simply projecting what's dominant in your inner imaginative world.
That completely inverts our usual perspective. We think the outside world is solid and the inside is flimsy.
Neville flips it entirely. The inner world is the source, the blueprint. Which means if you want to understand why things are happening in your life,
you need more than just logic. You need intuition.
You do. Logic and analysis deal with the external effects, the what. They can't reach the inner imaginative cause, the why. Intuition is what connects you to that deeper level of meaning. We have to lift up our eyes unto the hills within ourselves, observe our own consciousness, our imaginative activity. That's where the truth lies.
Okay. Now, I know Neville had some interpretations of biblical events that are, well, quite different. Let's talk about symbolic Passover and spiritual circumcision. These can be challenging.
Yes, these interpretations are very distinct. Take Passover. Traditionally, people understand it based on the Exodus story, a historical event, deliverance from Egypt, a memorial feast kept on a specific date each year with specific rituals like unleavened bread.
Right, that's the common understanding from the Old Testament.
Neville, however, says Passover is not a fixed historical event tied to a calendar date in that way. For him, it represents something internal, something symbolic.
A symbolic crossing. What's crossing what?
It's an inner crossing within you. He talks about the sun shedding its blood, symbolizing a disturbance, a death, and a resurrection. It's a personal, internal transition in consciousness.
So it's about letting an old state die.
Exactly. A current, unwanted state of consciousness, maybe limitation, fear, sickness, is passed over, it dies, so that a new, desired state can be born, resurrected within you. It's like your personal exodus from a mental Egypt to your promised land.
So it's not a once-a-year event, but an ever-present possibility for inner transformation.
Precisely. It's always available. It's about consciously choosing to pass over an old identity and assume a new one.
That makes sense within his framework.
Mm.
And how does spiritual circumcision fit in? That sounds even more potentially controversial.
It is provocative language, for
Mhm.
sure. But again, he's not talking about the physical ritual. For Neville, spiritual circumcision is a psychological act. It's the act of dropping the limited consciousness of man. All the beliefs tied to your physical form, your history, your circumstances,
Dropping the limitations to reveal what?
to reveal your true nature. The unconditioned awareness of being, the I am, which he calls the everlasting head of creation. It's like removing the final veil by knowing yourself simply as I am, faceless, formless, beyond any specific identity or figure.
So it's shedding all the labels, all the conditioned beliefs about who you are.
Yes, stripping away everything that isn't your pure divine awareness.
Mhm.
He uses that striking analogy. Man is the foreskin hiding the head of creation. I am the Lord hidden by the veil of man.
Wow. It reframes a physical ritual into this incredibly profound internal act of realizing your true, limitless divine nature beneath all the roles and limitations we adopt.
It's about recognizing your ultimate identity as that pure creative awareness, as God itself.
Okay, so understanding all this is one thing, but living it, maintaining it, especially when the outer world doesn't change instantly, that's the challenge. Which brings us to sustaining the practice, maintaining the imaginative state.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Because it's not usually about one flash of insight. It's about persistent cultivation of that inner state.
And the biggest hurdle here, for most people, is probably overcoming the interval of time, that gap between assuming the state and seeing it physically manifest.
Huge hurdle. Neville acknowledges that man is often a slave to time. If we appropriate a state in imagination, feel it real, but it doesn't show up quickly.
We lose faith. I
Right.
doubt. We drop the assumption.
Exactly. We drop the unseen claim and often revert right back to the old, unwanted state. The delay kills the manifestation.
But Neville says persistence is key.
It's everything. He says your Christ, your awareness, your imagination promises that if you persist, you will embody the new state. It's law. The key is unwavering persistence in feeling the reality of the unseen claim, regardless of appearances or how long it seems to take. Trust the inner law over the outer senses.
Holding the vision, holding the feeling, even when your rational mind or your bank account is screaming otherwise.
That's the discipline. And a powerful tool to help with this persistence is the power of thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, how does that help bridge the time gap?
Neville says praise and thanksgiving act like rain and sun on the unseen seed of your desire. Gratitude fuels the process.
But gratitude for what? For something you don't physically have yet.
Gratitude as if you have already received it. Feeling and expressing sincere thankfulness for the desire as an accomplished fact within your imagination. He argues that someone who isn't thankful for gifts already received, even if only received in imagination, is less likely to receive more. This quality of mind, this grateful heart for the assumed reality, is what makes the desert blossom as the rose. It transforms the inner landscape.
So it's not just being polite, it's a spiritual law. Feeling grateful now for what is already yours in imagination actually helps bring it forth.
Yes, it creates a receptive mind. A mind that feels and accepts the impression of being or having the desire is like fertile ground, the womb ready to receive the seed of your defined objective. Gratitude makes the inner soil fertile.
It sounds like a positive feedback loop. Gratitude strengthens faith. Faith sustains the assumption manifests, giving you more to be grateful for.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this intense, focused, feeling-based inner work is captured in one more powerful reinterpretation, the Gethsemane analogy.
Gethsemane, usually seen as a moment of agony, Jesus sweating blood before the crucifixion. How does Neville see it?
He sees it completely differently, not as suffering or submission to a painful fate, but as a spiritual act of generation.
Generation, like creating something.
Exactly. He frames it as the intense act of fixing your attention on your objective, your desired state, and disciplining your mind to remain faithful to that fixation, despite any inner conflict or outer cross of current reality. It's focused, inner creation.
So the focus isn't on the suffering, but on the desired outcome.
Yes. Neville says you contemplate the joy of realizing the desire. You focus on that joy so intensely that you press out the mystical seed, your defined desire. You remain in that joyous fixation until your whole being consciousness was bathed in an oily sweat, joy, resembling the joy of realization.
So the sweat isn't agony, it's the byproduct of intense, joyful, creative focus.
That's his interpretation. It symbolizes that profound inner transformation, that deep, blissful conviction that precedes the physical manifestation. It's the joy that comes from knowing it's done within, long before the outer world catches up. It's the inner reality becoming so potent, it's about to burst forth.
Wow. Gethsemane as the ultimate metaphor for the joyful, concentrated inner work of manifestation. Not pleading, but creating. What an incredible journey through these ideas.
It really is. We've seen how Neville reads the Bible not as mere history, but as this rich tapestry of psychological and spiritual parables.
Guiding us to understand the creative power of our own imagination, the I am within, and the unwavering law of assumption.
And the core message, the big takeaway from this deep dive, is just how incredibly empowered you are. The power to shape your reality, your entire experience, lies right within you.
You are the creator. The kingdom of heaven isn't somewhere else. It's right here, within your own consciousness, waiting for your imaginative direction.
So the question for you listening now is, how will you take these ideas forward? What does this deep dive mean for your approach to life, to your desires?
How will you start thinking from the end, not just of it? How will you use revision to consciously reshape your inner world, and therefore your outer one?
And here's a final thought to ponder. If your imagination truly is Christ, the divine creative power, what miracles will you dare to imagine, assume, and ultimately perform in your own life, starting today?